derpy da derp, stop making derpy faces. Derpy da derp, stop making derpy faces. Derpy da derp.
Heyo, my name's Chant, and welcome back to Planet Coaster 2. As you can tell by the intro, this is a tutorial on how to stop making derpy faces. I beg of you, please stop. So if you like any of these faces, these pictures that you see on the screen now, this is absolutely the tutorial for you. Now, I do want to say that this is not a tutorial for hair, or about bodies, or about the specifics of facial features, although we will touch upon that. This is really the basics of making the face so that it doesn't look derpy and it has the right foundation to look good. Shout out to Maggie, who had the nerve to call my derpy examples cute. I spent so long trying to make them not cute. Thanks, Maggie. First up here, we have the pieces that we will be using to make our example face. These shapes will differ based on what kind of face you're making and your personal preference. So don't think you're stuck to these, but these will be the ones I will use for our example. This basic shape face that I will be teaching you today will help you succeed in making great faces every single time going forward. Not guaranteed, but almost guaranteed. All right, let's take a look at the shapes here. First, we are going to be choosing a shape for the forehead. I like using the half shapes of the oval and circle for my forehead so that when I later put on the hair, I'm not running into the full circle or the full oval. Next up, we need a shape for the jaw or the chin. I prefer using the oval, especially for a long face, but for a shorter face, you might explore a few different options. Next up is the ears. I just use this little M&M shape. Boop, boop, one for each ear. Very easy, very simple. Next up is the nose. This is the thin cylinder with the M&M shape, very basic nose. For the eyes, we have the M&M shape again, and a half circle for the eyelid. For the eyebrow, which can also be used for eyelashes, which you will see in the example, we have the customizable text piece, which is absolutely great. It gives you flexibility. You can change the letter, you can change the color, you can size it down really small. And so for this shape in particular, I just typed in a parenthesis. All right, that's it for the shapes that we will be using today. So let's go ahead and dive into that example build. The first thing you're going to want to do is tilt your forehead just slightly so that you have more of the circle or face of the shape towards the front of your face. Next, you're going to take your chin, angle that as well, and fit it to the shape that you've chosen for your forehead. Again, we're just trying to make that forehead and chin shape look cohesive, so you'll probably be doing a lot of tweaking during this process and frankly throughout the entire process of making that face. Up next, we will add the neck to your forehead and jawline. And lo and behold, because we angled each one, there is the perfect little nook for you to place your neck every single time. Now, the neck mainly supports the back of the head, but it will be touching that jawline. So follow the lines that we've naturally created, place the neck, and then pull it back slightly so it is mainly supporting the back of the head. A small side rant over here. Hi, yeah, me again. A lot of times derpy faces look derpy because you forget to add the chin. The chin of a face juts outward. And a lot of times derpy faces have chins that kind of melt into the neck like it's a thumb. So this is going to prevent that from ever happening again. All right, back to it. Time to add the ears, and you will notice that I will make some fancy lines on the screen. All right, maybe not so fancy, but they are fairly evenly apart. We have the top of the head, the bottom of the chin, and then there's that natural line we created with the forehead and the chin and where those two meet. And then we added a line that is roughly right in between that eye line and the bottom of the jaw. All right, so these are roughly placed and they will change per character, per face. But this is a general rule I want you to keep in mind because that eye line is exactly where you will place the eyes. The line below that is where your nose will generally end. And in between the end of the nose and the bottom of the jaw is where the lips will go. Now, what does this have to do with the ears, you ask? I'm so glad you asked. So the top of the ears should line up with about where the eyes are, and the bottom of the ears will generally land where the bottom of the nose is. Proportions and placement really do matter, so I want you to keep all these lines and rules in mind as you build your faces. Alright, so from this side view, we have also created a very natural place to sit the ears. Again, foolproof, every time, works, unless you decide to change it. But we'll follow the same lines from earlier and we'll add one. We'll take into account that eye line that we created earlier. And roughly in that area is where you should place your ears. A lot of people tend to move the ears a little too forward, a little too close to the face, and that isn't quite right. They sit more in the center of the head. Okay, let's grab the eyes, place them on the line that was naturally made by the forehead and the jaw or chin. That placement makes it really easy to remember, and honestly, almost never fails you. One thing to keep in mind, if you're trying to make your character look more human, more natural, then make sure to shrink those eyes down. Real people have small eyes. Cartoons have big eyes. If you're making a cartoon, sure, go ahead, make them big as SpongeBob's round eyes. But for our purpose, let's try to keep it natural. Another good tip is the whites of the eye do not need to be pure white, and probably shouldn't be, especially again if you're going for a more human look. Just make them a little bit off-white. Now, all throughout this build, you'll see me tweaking everything, moving this, moving that, and eventually you'll see that I shape the eye so that it's much more elegant, more pretty, more dainty, more girly. I spent half an hour on this face, so that will give you a bit of a timeline for somebody who's been doing this for a while now. Don't be afraid to spend quite a bit of time on your faces. Getting them right will make you want to celebrate with confetti. Okay, here is a quick tip, and I'm going to follow it up with a different one for the same purpose. If you're going for a natural look, there is a rule that the space in between the eyes is exactly one eye's worth. So I go ahead and grab one of the whites of the eye, and I shift it over, and then I will separate the other two eyes according to that shape until there's a good balance there and it fits. Now, sometimes this isn't going to work, especially if you are going for a bigger eyed character. So the alternative is this. Take the width of the nose at the very bottom, where the nostrils are, and move that shape upward, and the space in between the eyes should be the width of that part of the nose. Again, this is just another general rule for proportion and placement that will help you get a consistent look every time. One thing I do recommend, whether it's a female or male character, is to add eyeliner, or eyelashes, if you will. And you do this by taking your eyelid, duplicating it, and on the same axis, move it up a little, and recolor it to a darker color, your eyelash color. In my case, I'm going full black. And then move it back down until it's hidden in the eyelid and only the bottom bit is showing. Later, you'll see that I angle it specifically to make it look like a fuller eyelash area. For male characters, I do this as well, but depending on the character, I usually use a lighter color. When placing your nose, remember those 4 lines from earlier. The top of the head, the bottom of the jaw, the eye line, and then that extra line that was almost directly between the eye line and the bottom of the jaw. That is where, roughly, the bottom of your nose should go. Again, this differs per character. But again, this is only a general rule for you to follow that will likely lead to a more successful character face. Okay, I definitely did not forget the lips twice in this video and had to come back to re-record. The lips that we're using here I pre-made, and it is a total of 6 pieces, and all 6 pieces are the same piece, and it is the half M&M. You'll see we use the same trick that we did on the eyelid to create the eyelashes. Basically duplicating the piece, moving it on the same axis, changing the color, and then tucking it right back in. This method of making lips is really growing on me, and you can play with the angles of the upper lips and the lower lip to get the right lip for your character. Earlier, when describing all of the pieces we were using, I kind of already described everything you need to know about the eyebrow. It's customizable, you can use multiple to make one eyebrow, and they make for beautiful extended eyelashes. Okay, this is a perfect time for another side rant while I build that character. I want to talk to you about old characters versus young characters. The best way to make an old character look old is by piling on the basic shapes. Consequently, the fastest way to make your young character look terribly old is by piling on the basic shapes. Less is more when you're trying to make a young character. And I don't mean a child character necessarily. I could mean a Disney princess character, for example. Someone in their 20s or 30s, for example. Somebody who doesn't have wrinkles. Every time you add another shape, you are adding shadows and lines that will look like wrinkles. Okay, rant is over. Let's get back to what we're building. Right now, we are putting in the iris, and I often, if not always, use this particular piece. The good news about this piece is that it does scale to Nigel size. What do you mean you don't know what Nigel size means? All right, we're pausing the video and we're introducing you to Nigel, okay? All right, I'll be back.
Welcome to the Nigel Snark Show. Welcome to the Nigel Snark Show! I'm Nigel Snark, your brutally honest, unapologetically witty critic, and this is the #1 show in all of Planet Coaster. Don't believe me? Just ask the Space Cow.
Okay, as you can see, Nigel is a stone guest piece in the park, and every time I refer to Nigel, that's what I mean. Another quick note on Nigel size features. It's important to note that the M&M shape used for the tip of her nose, which is also used for the whites of her eyes, will not scale to Nigel size. I repeat, this will not scale to really itty bitty tiny. However, it will be fine for your ears. So keep that in mind. You will need to find an alternative piece for the whites of the eyes for a very small character. And I will give you an example of that later in this video. Ah yes, this is the moment that I mentioned earlier where I angled that eyelid to give a more pleasing shape to our eye. I also let the eyelid overhang quite a bit on the sides to show off more of the eyelash liner that we created. The moment you've all been waiting for. We're talking about the Nigel size character that I made. Now, to be fair, this is close to Nigel size. She's slightly bigger than he is, but it's close enough, I think, for our purpose. And when you are standing on the ground in that third-person view, she's a really good natural height. As I said earlier in the video, we are not discussing body shape. Now, that being said, I'm going to give you a few tips and tricks when making a human body shape. First tip, extend the neck, make it longer. A lot of us tend to condense our characters as we're building them, and we don't realize that we're shrinking them when we should be expanding them. Use that same tip on the torso. A lot of times we just crush that torso into absolute nothingness. Expand that torso, expand the neck. No, we are not making an alien, so make sure not to stretch it too much. And lastly, do not cut your characters off at the knees. Make sure they have a full set of legs. Again, this is the same concept as the neck and the torso. When we make characters, we tend to condense them. So my tip is to just make sure every single part of it is elongated enough to look natural. All right, back to our Snow White character. I'm going to take apart her face. As we do so, I just want you to see that we followed every single rule that was shown in this video. I want you to see that her proportions look right. I want you to ignore the fact that the ears are a little too forward because I wanted them to peek out through the hair. And then I want to show you what exactly I used for the whites of the eyes so that I could get them that small. In the most recent DLC, which was the toy pack or the toy box pack, there's an item called a foot. And this is the foot for those little dolls, or Lego dolls. This is the piece I used, and as you can see, I had to angle it and just get a very small sliver of a corner of that piece, and then the rest of it hid in her head. That is what I used, and I think quite successfully, for the whites of her eyes. Oddly enough, this foot has a really glossy texture to it, which worked in my favor, because eyeballs are naturally a little bit shiny. The iris used for Snow White is the same object we mentioned earlier, but this time I turned it around and used the smaller end for her brown eyes. Now, I don't necessarily recommend building at such a small scale. Normally, I would probably build this a little bit bigger, and then every few minutes, shrink it down to make sure everything can scale to the smallest size that I would want. The problem at building at such a small scale to begin with is it's really tough on camera angles and really finicky when trying to click an object. So go ahead and build slightly bigger. Just make sure you're always checking that it sizes down properly. All right, this is the perfect time for another side rant. Let's talk about making your character's face perfectly symmetrical. If you have a hard time making sure that everything is sitting properly and scaled properly on both halves of the face, you can use this trick. Grab a mover, deactivate it, and build off of that. Start attaching things to it. Now you will have a few single items that don't need to be mirrored. The forehead, the bridge of the nose, the tip of the nose, and perhaps your chin. All those are single items. But all the rest of it you usually have two of, or more. You might have one or two basic shapes to fill out the cheeks on both sides. You've got one ear on both sides. Your eyes are made of multiple pieces on both sides. So when you're placing these items, use the mirror tool to get it perfect every time. And remember, it's really important for you to remember this. Anything that is attached to a mover cannot be easily scaled down. Okay, you'd have to edit that mover and then grab all the pieces and then shrink those pieces, okay? So it gets a little difficult to shrink things. Next, you have to worry about hiding that mover. And if it's a big character, that's easy. But if it's a small one, that gets a little tricky. I personally do not use this method, but I completely understand if that's something you guys want to do. And while we're here, I want to give you another tip. Yep, another one. A lot of builders like to put the iris in the center of the white of the eye. Please don't do this. When this happens, you risk your character looking like it's looking in two different places. One eye is looking off this way and the other eye is looking off this way, and it doesn't look great. Oftentimes, humans are looking at something much closer in range, therefore the eyes come in together slightly more. Now, we're not looking to make your character cross-eyed, but just bring them slightly in further than the midpoint of the eye. Before we sign off, I want to show you this example of an old character versus a younger character. Notice how the old character has a lot of basic shapes piled on. We've got the bulging cheeks. We have the half-circle jowls. We have the pointy chin. We have the bags under her eyes, and a very bulky upper lid when she blinks, and a very distinct nose. We know at a glance she is very old. Now let's take a look at the queen over here. She's looking much younger. Less lines on her face automatically do that. Her eyes, granted, should probably be pushed back into her head a little bit. I think they're sitting a little too far forward, but that's just nitpicking. To make a character look younger, you may also consider not showing the bridge of the nose and only having the little tip of the nose, like in this example of Juno. Alright, that's going to be it for this video. I hope it helps you in your quest to make the perfect face for your perfect characters. Bye now.